why does it have to be either or? I know people that are ETH maximalists, and when I mentioned that the gas price was high because it was like 500 gwei, which is like $100 a lot of times, and if you want to deploy a contract, 1,000 plus,
Yeah.
and I'm like, man, the cost of gas is really high, man, and now it's less than 10, thankfully. And he'd be like, I can't believe you're saying that to me. Do you know how much the Vitalik has done for us? And I'm like, oh man.
Warren Buffett knows what he's talking about.
Don't you mean Warren Buffett?
All right, guys, welcome to another episode of the Richuation Room. This will be a good one. I'm excited to talk to Rob today about kind of everything and anything cryptocurrency. We're going to get into a little bit about what's happened lately because it's been a very exciting few months in the crypto world. Rob, thanks for doing this, man.
You got it. Pleasure to be here. Enjoy the show.
Yeah, for those who are unfamiliar with you, kind of just give us a rundown about where you're coming from, a little bit about your background, and then what you're passionate about today in this realm of finance.
Happy to do that. Yeah, Bitcoin, class of 2014. I've been full-time into the space since 2017, when I really onboarded in a big way on Solidity, getting my nails dirty in terms of coding smart contracts on Ethereum, Tron, and then dipping my toe into some of the other projects like Stellar, and getting the meat and potatoes of how these smart contracts can be disruptive to accounting, law, and really, push forward some interesting use cases. I got a blockchain fundamentals course approved by CSU San Marcos here in the San Diego area in 2019. And we did that during the previous academic year, and then we're running asynchronous, so you can kind of do it in your own time starting in the fall. Been doing the crypto investor summit, so LA Blockchain Week, for about the last 3 years. And then, the YouTube channel since May of 2019 on all things crypto.
Awesome. So class of 2014, was Bitcoin your first exposure really to any cryptocurrency?
It was. I first heard about it through some Super Bowl sites. And I'm like, okay, I want to go in something beyond the office pool, when I was working at H&R Block.
Yeah.
And I see that the lines are sharper in some of these other areas, and they're using Bitcoin. Like, what is that? So I go to Wikipedia to see what Bitcoin's about. And I'm like, oh, this is a cool way to go peer-to-peer and transmit value, in a non-fungible way. And you can send it all over the world. And like, whoa, let me take a step back here. What in the heck is this? And that really piqued my interest, and I went from there.
So when you were first introduced to it, talk to us a little bit about kind of the story in terms of your either belief in it or your how you kind of went about using it or buying it, because a lot of people hear about it, right? Especially most people would say in 2017 is probably when they first heard about it these days, and they aren't usually buying then, or maybe they were and they had a bad experience and now they're back. So talk to us a little bit about kind of your adventure within that space.
Well, I was most interested in the utility, and I liked to be able to send something and not have to worry about a chargeback if you're a merchant. I had a bunch of years of experiences in like computer stores, and we send out a computer using PayPal, and then they would immediately do a chargeback, and then the money would get locked up, and then it's a 90-day hold. And from my bosses, they're like, there's got to be a better way to transact tech types of sales or commerce for trustless parties. So I liked the ability of a technology to send value and have it be non-recourse. And so, the other options at this point were, if you wanted to send value, had to use a middleman through like MoneyGram and all these like incredibly shady ways where the recourse wasn't really feasible for the counterparty to explore. So I like the utility of this, and I thought that its exposure on a broader level for more than just card transactions, especially for high risk businesses that credit card companies aren't super excited because the chargeback rates,
right,
would be interested to give a try to.
I think that's super interesting because it sounds like you were experiencing issues with this transaction area before you even knew Bitcoin was a thing. So when you saw it and you researched it, you were like, oh my gosh, this could be amazing, kind of from the start, where myself included and a lot of other people are like, oh, this could be a great investment vehicle, right, where I can grow my wealth. So that probably allowed you to see the light and kind of see the potential for crypto from the start, I would guess.
Yeah, I'm very use case driven when it comes to looking at altcoins or even Bitcoin. I like the metric of using Bitcoin as a competitor to, Western Union, or getting value out to other countries where there's not a huge dip in terms of the fees. So I first and foremost thought about it along those lines. And then I knew people from my college days that came from Russia, and former Soviet bloc, former USSR, and we're trying to get value from sale of homes, and they would tell me about, they'd get it in cash, and you have to hand it across the street to the bank, and there's like, a 6-foot gap when you could get robbed, and just like, all sorts of these crazy stories about transacting large amounts of capital. And I thought it's so seamless. I think at the time it was like $300, that to transact in this, and how this could really explode in terms of its utility.
Yeah, and I don't want to jump, too far off the edge here before we kind of just get this thing going. But while you're talking about potential use cases in other countries, can you kind of speak to what we could potentially see and how cryptocurrencies can solve a lot of issues in countries outside of the Western world specifically? Because I think, and this is something that's come up on my channel a lot, again, myself included, I think about crypto, I'm very self-centered, and I think about the United States and how good we have it here, and how, yes, our financial system definitely has flaws. It's by no means off the deep end like some of these more third world or second world countries. So where do you see cryptocurrency or any project maybe specifically really benefiting in those areas that we don't really think we need here, but could be a game changer in other spots?
Yeah, unbanked is huge. And I know people that are in, Russia, or countries that the currency has a built-in really aggressive inflation rate, and they're trying to get out of their native currency as soon as possible. And I like the push to straight Bitcoin. I know that there are people like, that are whales in Bitcoin that will take meetings like Tim Draper to South American leaders and will tout that, Bitcoin should be on your national balance sheet. And, they would say at LA Blockchain Week, like, there'll be a point in time when Bitcoin is on national ledgers, and only corporations will own it. And they're trying to kind of make it along those lines in terms of its utility. And I think that the way that at least the Draper suggested that get done is a more broad use of the Lightning Network, so you're not having those huge transaction costs, and that it can be done by scanning a QR code, and like it's being done in many parts of Western Europe now. Yeah. But to include people that are unbanked, that'd be big. I mean, I know they're doing it well in India with some of these apps, and some of them are talking about a tokenization backend. But the way that people can transact value outside of cash could only benefit the institution that jumps in big in that game.
Yeah, just for those that are listening, if you're not listening as a recent upload, I think it was probably a week and a half ago, where at the Bitcoin conference, they announced that El Salvador is making Bitcoin legal tender for them. So that's obviously the first country that's taking that massive step. And just from some of the things I've seen, it looks like they're getting the Lightning Network kind of up and running there. And I think I saw today that transactions in El Salvador are up 3x this month versus the same month last year. And hopefully it works out for them. And it's a huge step for cryptocurrency. Was hearing that news on your end something that was validating kind of towards your belief system, or how did you take that news?
Yeah, I think that the writing is on the wall with a lot of that. I really look to the tastemakers of, Greenwich, and a lot of the hedge fund guys too, because they have influence in a lot of the regions. And I'm seeing more and more large institutional investments into crypto. I know that they had Pomp that was interviewing Jim Cramer, and he was talking a little bit about once Bitcoin hit a certain threshold, I think it was like 50,000 at the time, you're seeing huge players that can finally invest because it's worth that much now. Yeah. And when it was smaller, they couldn't even touch it in terms of institutional capital. But I think that it's an interesting way to provide some stability to a country that has very little amount of stability.
Yeah, it'll be a interesting use case. It's actually something I was thinking. I don't want to compare it to what happened with Elon Musk and Tesla and that kind of thing. But I was like, okay, this one small country adopts it as legal tender. This could be really great, or it could be terrible, because if they don't handle it the appropriate way, that is one thing I don't think people are talking about, where it's going to scare a lot of people away, I think, personally.
I think the watershed for me was seeing the mayor of Miami really go all in. And I know that he has connections with a lot of Central America and South America, and he was kind of feeling the waters there. And his move to, yeah, direct city resources in that direction because he saw so much potential there. And then certainly all that FTX is doing in Miami and making that, the switch from San Francisco in terms of, crypto hub stateside. Yeah. That was like, oh, that could domino into South American countries. And then, who knows from there.
Yeah. Are you, if you don't mind me asking, are you currently in California?
I am. I'm in San Diego area. And yeah, we have a lot of, because we're a border city, have a lot of influence and read a lot of news about what's going on in TJ. I know they're trying to dip their toe into crypto a little bit with Tijuana, just on the border there, and then down to Rosarito. So Mexico's watching the US to see what they're doing in a big way. And of course, they don't have the regulatory difficulties that, we have with everything kind of ironed out as a first world nation.
Yeah, I'd say on the positive end, it looks like El Salvador could kind of be that first domino to fall, especially in South America, where a lot of people aren't going to want to be left behind, right? A lot of these countries are kind of, I wouldn't say neck and neck in terms of being, rivals or adversaries, but just in terms of trying to get economically ahead. I don't think they want to see one kind of press out too far in front of the others, with Mexico, of course, being the dominant force on the northern side.
Well, I would also see with my coworkers here that the remittances back to Mexico, I would do travel down Mexico, and you pay in pesos, but you get back, or sorry, you pay in dollars down there and you get back in pesos. So they're trying to get rid of the capital, any way they can. And and I would my buddies would tell me they'd pay a few $100 in fees remitting cash back to their families. And so I'm like, Western Union is just raking it in for these institutions just for such an easy use case. So I was really bullish for the longest time about blockchain being able to scoop up a little bit of that market share.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I haven't heard that before. That's hilarious that they will take your US dollars and get rid of their pesos. It's smart, I guess, on their end, right? It's a good backing to what potentially could come there. I want to get back to talking about smart contracts, because this is not something I'm very smart on. So maybe you can enlighten us a little bit. So first off, how'd you decide to get in that space? And then when you did, it sounds like guys like you are starting to introduce formal training courses and this kind of stuff, but it's really hard to find, right? You just got to kind of look things up and try and learn. So talk to us about how you got interested and then how you educated yourself.
I found a lot of value in really just the free resources that were out there. I remember using Quora, tutorials that were even on YouTube back in the day, explainers on, I guess, one of the precursors to Gitbook. So it's like essentially like a Medium, essentially like an article that would break down how it's coded, and what the possibilities were. I remember one of the keynotes one year was, Tim Draper, who, if you remember, I think he bought a few thousand Bitcoin from when Silk Road was seized, and it became just a big splash in the space. And he would talk about how a smart contract will be able to negate a lot of the small business costs when it comes to accounting and law, because they're binary contracts and they look to a trusted oracle. Let's just say NASDAQ. So if you're doing a contract with someone, you don't need an expensive lawyer to draft the contract. And they always say the best lawyers can wiggle themselves out of just about any legal, agreement.
Right.
So I didn't want to bank on my lawyer being better than the other person's lawyer, especially if I'm dealing with, credit-worthy institutions, AAA. I didn't really trust that relationship. So I thought, wow, if I could learn kind of how all this works, how it could be deployed in the long term, riding the first wave of this could serve me in good stead. But yeah, for accounting and law, to be able to know the contract hasn't been changed, you can't mess with the results of it, and it's going to happen how it's going to happen based on a third party is pretty powerful for both sides of the equation.
Can you, I'm trying to figure out the best way to word this, but can you just kind of break down what is a smart contract and what peace of mind, maybe, like, why does it add so much peace of mind to something that you're doing? If it's a legal contract, a transaction, whatever the case is, what is a smart contract, just for those who are unfamiliar?
Sure. A smart contract, in the language that I use it, which is Solidity, is a .sol file. And very often you'll go to a trusted open source depository for this. So let's just say GitHub. And what people will do is they'll say, okay, here's a smart contract that isolates if Bitcoin goes to, let's say, 100,000, then this party will send this party a Bitcoin, for example.
Right.
Sometimes they're doing it for a bet or what have you. So what a coder would do is he would look at an audited set of code, and one of the memes is, what is a Solidity or a blockchain engineer? And it's a Control C, Control V. It's a lot of times the code is pretty well set, and you just have to isolate and change some of the parameters.
Right.
And so what I will do is I'll take, okay, so here's a tested amount of code that does a specific function. And I save it as a .sol file. I change a little bit of it. I write the wallet of both parties, and then I what's called deployed on the contract. So let's say it's on Ethereum. I would use my MetaMask wallet, put in a certain amount of gas, and then boom, it gets stamped on the blockchain after however much time based on the amount of gwei or gas. And then I use a tool like Etherscan, and I upload the code so that can verify to both sides that it's verified code. So now both sides are happy that we're looking at this oracle, which is an oracle is like looking at NASDAQ, or in this case, Coinbase, that we're both agreeing that Coinbase, when they say it's at 100,000, they're not lying. And that both sides agree that this event's going to happen. This one Bitcoin would be sent from one party to the other.
Right.
So that's in essence what a smart contract is for an agreement,
And in terms of your involvement there, you were kind of acting as an intermediary between the two parties. Is that correct?
Yeah, the person that deploys the contract just makes sure that both wallets addresses are there, that there's not any problems with the code, that it's trusted code. It can't be audited or it can't be drained. There's not, I'll do penetration tests. So I'll make sure that there's really no wiggle room for either party or a hacker to go in there and drain it for the one Bitcoin.
Right.
And that there's no or minimal possibility of a rug pull, or that the oracle can't be messed with, because very often you'll see these large projects, decentralized applications, and they won't verify their code. So they'll do that because they like having it as a black box that they can mess with things down the road. One code will allow them to control the entirety of the contract. So yeah, I just essentially help both parties stay honest to each other, and then get the stamp of approval by seeing it verified by a trusted source.
Got it. And is this something that you can profit off of?
A lot of times the people that are doing the deploying of the smart contract are just paid, by the hour, because it's so seamless. There are tutorials, Free Coding Academy has it. There are MOOCs out there on Coursera or edX that can help people do this. So it's not so much the technical understanding that's valuable. It's more the players involved or the community. I'll just tell you that one of the interesting things about the last few years of the crypto community is, for the longest time, I thought that the technology would lead the value. And it's really been the opposite way. The community has really brought the value, and the projects that are first movers, they do well, like Uniswap, has maintained majority market share for that,
right.
50-50 exchange. But what we're seeing now with the airdrops, with decentralized organizations, autonomous organizations, DAOs, that I think is a reflection of, if you're not trumpeting, or people that you respect aren't trumpeting a project, this code and all this tech can be easily replicated or forked. And then, you have all the perfect workforce. So in the case of version 1 and version 2 fully able to be forked. So you had, Sushi Swap and all these other projects that just forked it in a night, and then enlisted influential people to say, hey, this looks pretty good. And then for a while, they would even get more staked than Uniswap did. Wow. So it's interesting to see how the community and that push for social media really is the name of the game now in crypto for a lot of these, especially DeFi projects.
Yeah, it feels like, maybe this kind of goes for a lot of things in technology, especially with social media, but it feels like the first movers that do something well enough, as long as they get a solid backing behind them, they're kind of off to the races, right? Because like you said, a lot of these things, there's obviously unique differences between some of these projects, but what's the difference in Google and Ask Jeeves, right? One did a much better job after X amount of years, and people just kind of trusted it because it was probably the first mover. And I don't think Ask Jeeves is even a valid URL anymore. I don't know. Do you remember Ask Jeeves?
Absolutely. Ask.com. Yeah, I remember using askjeeves.com. That was great back in the day.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest light bulb moment for me was when I logged into my MetaMask and I saw the first Uniswap airdrop. And I'm like, holy smokes, my entire Christmas spending, even if I sell just half of it, is completely wiped out. What is
Wow.
going on here? And then I read what Hayden wanted to do in terms of incentivizing early adopters and talking about how I know that the Git coin project tries to incentivize open source development, but incentivizing these early adopters that are in there, trying new tech, putting in crypto to help it scale, and trumpeting their successes, or talking about the tech on their YouTube channels, podcasts, their influential place. By rewarding these people, it actually is a positive feedback loop, which it makes them reward a project, or talk about a project even more.
Yeah.
And then the most interesting thing is the people that I've seen that have really done well, they won't sell their airdrops because they're like, Rob, my cost basis is zero. So no matter when I sell, my ROI is infinite.
Yeah.
So, they're holding on to, thousands of their Uniswap tokens. And, as it goes with the 30, 40, they're looking, really smart. But I would always tell people along the way, I worked at private equity for a year, and the smartest people in San Diego County, they'd always say, when something doubled, sell half. You don't want to be left holding the bag when it goes to nothing. So, and that's what I've tried to do. But looking at Uniswap going from 3 to 45, maybe that wasn't the smartest decision. But I'm happy that I at least sold out baseline amounts.
I think we've all had those instances where you look back, like, how did I sell? And then you realize the gain that you made on the sale is something ridiculous. It's like, you can't beat yourself up too much for that. But again, I just want to kind of break it down a little bit for those who are not as familiar. Talk about MetaMask just really quickly, and then talk about airdrops really quickly, just in simplified terms.
MetaMask is a wallet that is a Chrome extension. So you download a Chrome extension and it allows you to use Ethereum.
Right.
And it also allows you to use other tokens that use the Ethereum virtual computer, EVM. And what I do work with is other tokens that use the Ethereum virtual machine. And an airdrop is if you interact with, like the first example of Uniswap, I went on there and traded, let's say 10 DAI, which is the stablecoin linked to the dollar, and over collateralized by the MakerDAO project by staked Ethereum. And then for that, I got Ethereum. And so, transacting these various tokens, I got a stamp on the blockchain. So they say, oh, Rob used our platform. Thank you. We have a representative total of the total, representative stake in the total, like essentially equity is what it is. They send you like a stock like token.
Right.
And that comes, without cost. And when you open up your wallet, you're able to see, oh, I have this token here, and I could do something with it. I could leave it in here forever or whatever. It's just a token, so to speak, of appreciation for using their platform. And it's a way they incentivize people to continue to use it.
Yeah, makes sense. Similar realm, we've been seeing a lot of altcoins popping up, especially every time kind of we go into this crypto bull run. It seems like more and more altcoins pop up. I think we're up to close to 10,000. You probably know the number better than I do, but it's something along those lines. And with that comes these stories of celebrities, influencers, whoever you want to call them. Literally, they've just given, right, a couple thousand, whatever coin, the hot coin of the day is. And then there's really no repercussions for them just to kind of pump the coin and see what happens. So how do you kind of view this in the crypto space? Because I think a lot of this stuff is very diluting and it gives people the wrong idea. I don't know about you, but when I walk around my workplace, I hear more people talking about Dogecoin than any other crypto on the market. And I just kind of keep my mouth shut and keep walking because I know I'm not going to get through to anybody in a quick conversation at the water cooler. So How do you kind of view these crazy altcoins, influencers pushing different things, and just the mania that's going on right now?
I tell people if they want to get us even a significant or even a small stake in crypto in any degree, try to get any of the forthcoming airdrops. Or there are ways, like for example, there's a site, Publish 0x. You can write articles about the news or crypto, and they'll give you, airdrop tokens on a weekly basis. So you can get value there. Do not put your fiat into crypto, because it will very likely have a volatility that you won't be able to stomach. I know someone that, like you were mentioning, they saw Doge being discussed on SNL, and they thought that if it's linked to one of the richest men in the world and they're talking about it, should be on their purview for their investment portfolio. And I asked her, I'm like, okay, you're putting in $500. How would you feel if you lost $10 of that? And she's like, well, I'd be sick to my stomach. And so I said, in no way should you get anywhere near FTX or any sort of leverage trading platform, because she says, I hear that you can do 100x, 101x, 125x a lot of times. And I'm like, well, in your jurisdiction, you can't. You have to use a proxy, and you have problems there, and then it's on your taxes now. They're going to be asking about it when you do a return, like they did last year. Do you own digital assets?
Yeah,
virtual currencies, I think the IRS call it. But I tell them, you really don't, because even the ones that it seems like they have nicely distributed amount of people that own the token, so you can't get a whale that'll slam it.
yeah,
That there's too much volatility there because it's paired against Bitcoin, right? So the base crypto pairs are against Bitcoin. So when Bitcoin goes up, it's getting pushed up. When it goes down, it's getting pushed down through no fault of its own.
right.
So it can be a great project, and it's going down. And in terms of the celebrity angle, I know that people that lead projects, they'll pay through Cameo or through direct DMs, and they'll pay them a handsome amount for a tweet, and then they'll retweet it and trumpet it and say this person's providing legitimacy. They'll have like a 2-minute interview with Woz or something that's really piecemeal, but taken out of context seems really impressive. But a lot of times that's done at arm's length. It's done through their PR organization. It's done through an entity that's supporters of this project. And it's definitely not kosher. From the celebrities' vantage point, they're getting their fee, but you don't want to be influenced by a project that really has no meaningful stake besides an entity that's trying to push it up.
Yeah, makes sense. I find myself struggling a little bit in this realm because obviously freedom of choice, right? Allow people to buy the stupid coins that they want to buy, allow people to make the stupid coins that they want to make. But the other side of me, because I have such a strong belief in Bitcoin and some of the more prominent projects, is like, I feel like this is bad for the environment. It's one of these things where I feel like it's distracting, and I feel like it's kind of diluting the market a little bit. So I kind of struggle back and forth with that. But how do you feel about, shit coins or whatever people want to call them, where there's really no, there's nothing you're really getting out of it other than the ability to buy something, and it's just a made up currency, for lack of a better phrase.
Yeah, I think a lot of these projects don't know how, or people I don't think fairly understand how simple it is to deploy these coins. Many people have a basic idea. They'll have what's called a white paper written, and it'll a lot of times not even be in proper English. And then, for $100, a lot of these platforms can get going. And it's just a matter of doing hashtags and then trying to pump it up. If you're on Discord, you'll get a bunch, or at least I do. I get dozens a day. Check out this token. We're already on Uniswap. I remember when I was on, oh, geez. Yeah, I was like a Twitter Spaces, and it was like a pitch room with VCs. And they're saying, our project is so esteemed that it got listed on Uniswap after many months of vetting. And no one that was on the main panel was like, wait a minute, anyone can list on Uniswap. This is, there's no red flags going off here because there's such a lack of understanding.
Yeah.
And that's also why I think that I like the movement for DAOs to go forward. So, on Reddit, which is the real home for long form crypto discussions, you have, ETH Trader, cryptocurrencies, Fortnite VR, and a lot of these tokens being started to be virtually valueless. But when you look at the airdrops that are happening on a month-to-month basis for people's memes or commentary, it amounts to quite a bit. So people are earning a sizable amount of crypto just doing these posts, adding vibrancy to the community, bringing other people to the community. And then these subreddits are doing an interesting job by bringing further use cases for the currency. So, either buying it back with memberships or having advertisers use the moons, as they say, or whatever the token is. And then the result of that is either gets burned and the percentage of your tokens become more representative of the total platform, so it goes up because there's less of them,
Right.
or the value goes up by the buying up at a certain time that kind of pushes it up. I do stuff with the XDAI community on there, and just any kind of post, any commentary, any discussion about it, they provide the RXDAI token. So I think that's a good way if you want to introduce the rest of the world to crypto. It should be not by losing your shirt by going 125x, but I think being rewarded for a funny meme or something that is a feel-good situation.
Yeah, and the other argument that I've heard that has kind of made me sway a little bit the other direction is, I think it was, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the guy who runs the Bitcoin Cash podcast, but he was talking about Dogecoin in a way where, somebody goes to Dogecoin and they get burned, right? Well, at least now they're introduced to the crypto space and they're like, oh, it's kind of cool. Let me do a little bit more research, and maybe they find a more legit project. So that's another way that I thought was like, oh, that's kind of interesting.
It's funny how projects are so dependent on the leadership.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's just one or two. I think Roger Ver does BCH. You have Justin Sun with Tron. Of course, Satoshi. I think one of the biggest blessings about Bitcoin is that they haven't had a person, besides a few that have purportedly, presented themselves as him, but no one that's definitively been proven to be him. My DMs are going to get full as a result of this, I bet. But I think that the leadership of the project is so important. And when someone like Vitalik Buterin goes on to Lex and does a good interview, the pumping of the coin, and people get so enthusiastic about a single personality and person, when we know that Ethereum is a foundation, based in, I think it's Switzerland or Sweden. He's Russian Canadian, but he's really the figurehead. And so I thought it was also interesting how even when we're trying to promote the DAOs, the decentralized organizations, as the technology being pushed to the forefront, we still really do look for a visible figurehead to lead the way in a lot of these.
Yeah, and you're even seeing, like we talked about with Bitcoin, this decentralized network. I mean, there are people, like you said, that have, for better or worse, people like Michael Saylor and the Winklevoss twins and Elon Musk, as much as people hate to admit it, have large influence over this thing. And I don't know that that's going to change in the near term. I think it needs to get to a sizable market cap, probably, I don't know, closer to a $5-10 trillion market cap before we're seeing any directional stuff just from a CEO tweeting something out. But on that same line, while we're kind of talking about community, I think something else that I've kind of noticed lately, and again, as a guy who's a true believer in Bitcoin and I don't really mess around with anything else, it's been tough to watch, is things like at the Bitcoin conference where just these hardcore Bitcoin maximalists, right? And where if you even mention another altcoin of any sort, you're going to be kicked out of the building. And for me, I'm like, why are we approaching this with I think they're starting to call it toxic Bitcoin maximalism or something like that. And maybe that is the right term for it, because it's just this idea that it's Bitcoin all the way and no other project's going to have any survivability or any use case. So how do you kind of see the cryptocurrency community in terms of, a lot of people take sides? It's like their sports team, and they won't, no matter what happens to the thesis, things could change and they're never going to kind of alter their viewpoint on it. So how do you kind of view that space, and especially the Bitcoin maximalist type area?
If someone's firmly a maximalist and really eschews anything other than their intended coin, a lot of times I'll just unfollow them on Twitter, because that shilling, there's a place for that. And it's interesting if they have some compelling points, but I think that this ecosystem, it's so, at least how it started out, people support each other. There's open discussions, there's long form discussions. I don't like it when people are using bots or accounts that are, egged, anonymous accounts on Twitter, and will kick down a project or try to be negative just for the sake of, being negative. So I understand that when you have an anonymous component of social media that just wants to be negative to make their project seem more viable, there's a place for that, and introducing doubt may help your project in the long run. But yeah, just to be all in on a project and not have an open mind for anything other than that project, I think is foolhardy. I like that the Bitcoin maximalists that I follow, I like Pomp because he has a big following, obviously, and has a wide range of guests. But I like that he also will entertain the thought of, the market cap proves the leader in the long run, and there could be other projects that are doing interesting things. You mentioned Winklevoss. I like that even though they are Bitcoin bulls, they will pat the project on the back, when Ethereum's doing well. And I really think that when it comes to tastemakers, that the Winklevoss twins, because they have such an ingrained network on Wall Street, at Harvard, in the Hamptons, like they know everyone. And so when a country really flips, it's only when the people that are in a leadership role in finance and government take a meaningful stake in it, can things kind of change for the rest of us. So for the longest time, I would only use, Gemini, because these guys are a known commodity. They're already in Facebook, and they know everyone.
Yeah.
And so I feel like if I'm putting my fiat on some sort of platform, I at least don't want them, fading into obscurity, which these guys under no circumstances will, because everyone knows them. The Social Network movie, they're famous in their own right. So.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Those are probably three of the guys that I respect the most in that field, because a guy like Pomp will still have DeFi guys on his podcast. He'll still have people talking about Ethereum on his podcast. And I think he would legitimately, if the thesis changed and he was like, okay, maybe there's a better thing out there, I think he has like the wherewithal to switch, and or maybe not even switch, but at least acknowledge, right? Where some of these guys, it's like, it doesn't matter what happens. They've put their line in the sand, and they're not going to budge.
I know they have ones that I think will specifically be bears just for the attention, and they're playing the devil's advocate. And that, I think, is tiresome. And so I don't like dissension for the point of just generating conversation. It has to have a meaningful backing to it. And so, yeah, I understand the need for thoughtful discussion. And if the points have value and you're bringing something to the conversation, like the debate that you have, if both sides are bringing up good points, I think that's a really important part of discourse. Yeah. And shutting down that discourse should not be promoted at any level.
Yeah, like, would you not, if you're a Bitcoin maximalist, would you not want Bitcoin to be challenged in any way? Like, the only thing that's going to make it better is if it's challenged. And if projects pop up where it's like, man, this might be a competitor, and then the community makes a decision to upgrade and make slight changes here and there that are going to be beneficial in the long run. That's what it's all about. It's like, you don't want to run this thing like North Korea, where everybody thinks that the supreme leader is the one, and nothing you can do or say is going to, like, take or downgrade them in any way. I don't know. I think it's good for the space.
Why does it have to be either or? I know people that are ETH maximalists, and when I mentioned that the gas price was high, because it was like 500 gwei, which is like $100 a lot of times, and if you want to deploy a contract, 1,000 plus.
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, the cost of gas is really high, man. And now it's less than 10, thankfully. And he'd be like, I can't believe you're saying that to me. Do you know how much the Vitalik has done for us? And I'm like, oh man. But a lot of this is, they say that a rising tide raises all ships.
Yeah.
I think that it's incumbent upon all crypto leaders to advance the ecosystem, like not by tearing each other down, but yeah, saying that project, like you say, Bitcoin is good for this is good for this, and it's not at the expense of the other.
Yeah, I could very easily see a world where Bitcoin emerges as kind of like gold 2.0, right? Very clear store value, and other things come along where this is going to be used a little bit more for transactionary stuff. Or I think Saylor was even saying today, and I think it confused some people. He was saying, I don't know if you saw the clip. He's basically saying that he thinks the US dollar will continue to be the global reserve currency, but it will basically be on the rails of Bitcoin, which to me kind of sounds like gold-based currency, right? It's a very similar concept, just using a different thing to peg the dollar off of. I don't know if that's exactly what he was getting at, but it just goes to show that there can be multiple fish in the sea, and they're all just going to be kind of doing their own job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was interesting how the digital yen really made the Federal Reserve Bank hop to and start exploring this in a big way. It may have been the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston or one of the ones out east that is playing around with a blockchain architecture just to kind of keep track of things. So he may have been referencing that. But yeah, I like, they've tried different things in the Caribbean with their sand dollar, and they've tried like different interesting experiments. But I'm really amazed at how you're providing a lot of stability through these community organizations like the Trust Dollar or XDAI, or let's see, Polygon has a token that's linked to the dollar. I'm amazed that really the stability of a lot of these tokens that are linked to the dollar, it's the community that's using these traders to keep things in line. And I think if you have the government that comes in and says, boom, I think it's actually the case for USDC, where the FDIC is backing the token once you get it on the platform. But if the government can say, everyone that uses the USA coin or whatever is backed by the Federal Reserve, if you KYC in, like, that's powerful, and that'll make a lot of altcoins have to try to compete with something new.
Yeah, absolutely. The other funny argument I hear, and this is probably just from people who are not very educated on the space, but when every time, every 3 months, there's a rumor that pops up where it's like, oh, there's going to be a US dollar coin, whatever they're going to call it. Is this the end for Bitcoin and cryptos? It's like, well, you don't really understand like, if they can just print digitally more US dollar coins, then what does it really matter? Nothing's really changing. We're just getting rid of the printing press. I don't know.
I think the most compelling thing, they asked a question and answer to Pomp. It was like, what could really make Bitcoin go to $1? And it would have to be wide scale banning of its use, and to keep the public ledger public. Because I know that the IRS through Coinbase, like, they will scrape the blockchain. And so if you KYC into one of these exchanges, they know every transaction that happened, and they'll make sure that the transactions that are reported are consistent with what's being reported to the IRS. Yeah. So, you have projects like Monero or others that are doing a concerted effort to have a private blockchain. And I think in some countries, maybe in France, that they're actually blocking the uses of a lot of these private blockchains because it's inaccessible, or they can't audit it on any level, even if they have a node.
Yeah.
Or a computer that's privy to a lot of the data. It's obfuscated by the actual wallet itself.
Right.
But yeah, I think if there's some sort of ban that's like literally in every country, that could happen. But you're right. There's always going to be some sort of jurisdiction like Singapore that's going to say, we're going to have the most aggressively pro-crypto laws. So come here and do business, and then the whales will come in force.
Yeah, I totally agree. What do you think the biggest threat is in the crypto space, or maybe just to make it easier, Bitcoin specifically, because a lot of projects?
I think that there's a concerted effort of broker dealers and the banking institutions, and rather than the Winklevoss twins and a few kind of pocket billionaires here and there, if there was like a wave of regulatory difficulties, then that would present an insurmountable problem. I know Elizabeth Warren talked recently about the electricity being a problem, and yeah, it does take as much electricity as like a country in Africa or maybe a small one in Asia to provide that backing to make it so that you can't do a 51% attack, which is like making the blockchain so you can reverse it or create fake transactions. So yeah, if there was some sort of push there, I think that could buckle. And the other thing is that if you have like smart computers in the future that would be able to do an aggressive attack onto the passwords of the wallets, so be able to find out what the wallet passwords are, that would essentially render the blockchain useless, because any wallet address would be able to be compromised. But from my understanding of quantum computing, that's a little bit of a ways down the road.
Yeah.
So I think those two, regulatory and then quantum computing, really kicking off in a big way would be a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with most of that. Luckily, and I'm an idiot when it comes to like engineering and science and stuff. So I'm just going off what I've been able to research, but it doesn't sound like the amount of quantum computing they would need is going to be happening probably anytime in our lifetime. It seems pretty unrealistic at this point.
Exactly, Rich. That's as far as what I've seen too. Yeah, it's a long ways down the road, but I would tell the people that are interested in this space that we were talking before the call, like I became educated myself on free resources on the internet, and there's a real aggressive push for free things on the internet, and there is a lot of great free content. And even in my education, I'm still amazed at the free sources you're able to pull up on Coursera and edX. And then when I talk to employers, at least in the San Diego area, all the way up the coast to San Francisco, the push now is that people aren't as interested in kind of where you went to school. The first thing I'll get from a company president.
No problem. I'm gonna cut this right out.
Appreciate that. Love live to tape. Is what's their GitHub, and they'll want to see the development that they've done, what they've been able to do in practice. And a lot of these MOOCs, as they say, massive online courses that can be enrolled by anyone for free most of the time, you're able to get your nails dirty in terms of doing a little bit of the code. You're able to learn along the way, depending on how fast you want to learn. And the people that I know that are in computer science and are intimidated by blockchain tech, there are no textbooks really. There's some TED Talks, but they were forever ago. Like, where do I start?
Yeah.
And there's just so much great free resources. And I would encourage people just to do a Google search, jump onto those free platforms. And there's a lot of opportunity, especially stateside. I remember my undergraduate degree was in architecture, and I did some stuff in real estate and finance. And I would always tell myself, even if you're in California, which is where I am, and I graduated in 2008. So I'm like, by the time it's 2020 or thereabouts, like every coder job in the US is going to be gone. And I've only found that there's been a more aggressive hiring clip. And essentially in California, we've seen a lot of demand. If you look on the Glassdoor numbers, it continues to go up for this type of coding. And it's really, really interesting to see how a country's currency and the demand will still kind of keep pace, because, in the US, we have a lot of VCs. We have a lot of entities that want to grow small businesses. So I know that you have like a lot of listeners in the US and Europe, Canada. So I encourage people, if they see amazing coders like on Europe or on YouTube that are from, all around the world, I'd encourage them to still give it a try.
Yeah.
And to see if it's something they have a passion for.
Yeah, I think that's part of that exponential technology growth curve, right? It's easy to think, all the jobs are going to be taken, but man, it's crazy. We're just getting started, as crazy as that sounds, and it's only going to be more and more in demand as we progress here. While we're talking about resources to learn, let's talk a little bit about what you provide. I know you put out a newsletter on LinkedIn. Talk to us a little bit about that, and then let's get into what you provide with the course that you're getting cleared to teach. Right? It's going to be virtually. Is that right?
Yeah. The previous year, it was available with live office hours and to the extension school at CSU San Marcos. And now it's asynchronous. We're seeing a lot of platforms like Coursera and stuff, and schools that are putting it on there so people can learn it at their own schedule. I have young kids, and I know a lot of people are trying to juggle learning a new skill with a full-time job and then family and all that. So I found the most interest in this type of alternative format for the delivery of this content. So you can look for that on my LinkedIn, which is LinkedIn/IN/DeFi. And then on there, I have a link to my newsletter as well. I found with the newsletter that all this is so quick that people want to know, like, oh, Elon Musk was on SNL. What are the implications for these various projects? What does his involvement say about crypto as a whole? And you can't really find that in a book as much. And I was impressed by the number of really compelling newsletters that are already out there. Castle Island, Pomps is good. And there's a whole host of them on Substack that are free. And if you pay the $10 a month for a lot of them, it's amazing the quality of the research. Mowry is another one of them that you'll get, like, really good. And so also have a book coming out, DAO, The Time Is Now, where I'm just talking essentially about how these horizontal organizations are so much better for the people that are working in them. Because while the power shift really in vertical organizations, which is most of the legal entities here in the States, does flow to the top, and we are looking for that figurehead, with a DAO, so many of the people that come on and provide value along the way, when there's a pop and the organization sells or tokenizes or whatever, you have hundreds of people that are having a meaningful impact on that, as opposed to kind of like a strategic few. And we're seeing with the pandemic that I think a lot of these use cases, especially in crypto and remote work, got moved forward a decade and a year.
Yeah.
Because prior to this, I think you'll agree, Rich, like the concept of remote working or being outside of the office for like months, or just middle managers want to be able to kind of watch what you're doing and keep you accountable so they can kind of justify their jobs a lot of times. I know there's good middle managers. I have a lot of friends that are, but the fact that organizations have run just as well or even better a lot of times with remote work has proved that a lot of these decentralized organizations that are fragmented around the world, and that distribute rewards among employees in a much more egalitarian way, can scale and do well. And it's cool to see that.
Yeah, I totally agree. Before we go, it is a crypto podcast, or I guess a crypto interview. So it would be wrong of me to let you go here without giving some type of prediction on the rest of the year. So it looks like you're already rolling your eyes at this question. You can shrug it off if you want, and we can move on. But
no, I have a definite take on this. I think any token that is firmly saying that we're an infrastructure, like Ethereum, for example, they do sprinkle in a certain amount to support the open source use of their technology. I think it's hard to nail down a value associated with that.
Yeah.
I think that I look in terms of what I spend my time in. I do DAOs that are generating revenue, or I look at projects like FTX, which have leadership that are investing in good efforts to involve mass adoption, get people on board, and then have a real profit backing that goes into a token burn. So it's pushing up the token based on the scarcity and then buying it up internally.
Right.
Kind of like the stock buybacks that you're seeing a lot of times with big organizations that are most likely done because a lot of the options that are awarded to executives are based on a stock price. So they have a natural incentive to push the stock price up. So these organizations like a DAO would have an incentive because it pushes up the whole community to push the token price up. So I'd say I would predict that platforms that have a strong profit backing, I'll say, if I could say a token, I'll say FTT, because with all this volatility that you're seeing, when positions are closed out, the fees are enormous.
Mm-hmm.
So platforms that are earning, like Binance earns $1 billion a year, FTX is right on its heels, and that cash goes into buying the token back based on a schedule that it is very forthright about. So I'd say any token that has a profit backing and that keeps them within a reasonable range. I know Coinbase went public at a 200 price to earnings, which is huge. And that's the reason why so many people went liquid, especially the VCs. But if they're modestly valued and they have a profit backing, then I feel good about it.
Okay. Yeah, I'll take that answer. I'll be keeping track of that. Well, Rob, I got one question. I try and ask everybody. As you can tell, I'm ripping one off of Pomp's podcast where he asks everybody the same question. So if you had 24/7 access to one mentor, dead or alive, who would it be?
I'm really impressed with engineers that can speak well, because like the engineers that I know, they say if you can speak well and you're good at being an engineer, that's like a superpower.
Yeah.
A lot of people have either or. So I think an engineer that really speaks well, I would like to have as a mentor. And I think, honestly, I got to give it up to Vitalik, because Vitalik or Lex, because I consider them both pretty dyed-in-the-wool engineers.
Yeah.
I would be fine being mentored by either of those because they can speak well. And, Vitalik.
Lex Friedman, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. For years, Vitalik would go to conferences, community build, glad hand, talk to engineers, kind of buy them beers, and get to know them on a one-to-one basis. But if you can be good with people, speak well, and then you know what you're talking about in terms of the tech, man, you're really kicking off. And things did kick off for him. So either one would be good.
Yeah, and Vitalik could teach you his dance moves also. That'd probably go. Hey, he's got the speaking and he's got the engineering, so we can forget about the dance moves. That's only fair. He can't have it all.
You got that right, Rich.
All right, Rob, go ahead and close out with any closing thoughts you have, and then where people can find you.
I would go back to people look into the awesome MOOCs they have on edX, Coursera. Feel free to check out my asynchronous MOOC on my LinkedIn, subscribe to the newsletter. And you can find me on LinkedIn/IN/DeFi. And I'd be happy to have you as a subscriber on the newsletter, and keep staying tuned to this awesome podcast.
Thanks again, man. It was a lot of fun. We'll do it again soon.
Have a good one.